Hello, friends. I hope you're having a lovely day. I've been listening to many traditionalist thinkers lately, and I've been reading Evola. Evola, along with Gunan, is of course the Archbishop of traditionalism, and he believes that the essential problem with the modern world is that we have lost touch with the transcendent. Being a believer in Nietzsche myself, I naturally share many of the same views and find myself drawn to traditionalist thinking. And that's why it surprises me that Evola had such a strong critique of Nietzsche. Evola says that Nietzsche is, in the end, not so much different than a communist modern man, as they both believe in pushing forwards a future man without explicitly aiming towards the transcendent God and the higher world. This is where I have to disagree strongly. And were Evola alive, I would wish that he reread Nietzsche's passages in Thus Spoke Zarathustra and Beyond Good and Evil. Nietzsche's solution to modernity is often misunderstood as a pure affirmation of life, but this is not the case. Nietzsche's works are explicitly a call by the god of Dionysus, who Nietzsche explicitly writes has possessed him, towards the higher man of the future. So he's calling out to the higher man of the future who will appear after the last man, as he writes in Thus Spoke Zarathustra. He explicitly writes in Beyond Good and Evil that he wants the man of the future, that he calls to the man of the future, and that he knows the man of the future will create a new and a greater and a higher society with high ups and high lows. And Nietzsche puts this forward. I believe it's implied that this is the seed of a transcendent religion left by him as a prophet. Now, I think when addressing Evola's understanding of Nietzsche, because I think it's a misunderstanding, really, we have to get down to what does Evola believe? Evola believes that civilization is at its highest when it has a traditionalist society with a full order, with a sacred order that you can be inducted to, aiming towards the transcendent God, and that as it declines spiritually, where people no longer have direction, people are no longer in touch with the divine, with the true nature, with the higher. And he believes that in the modern world, we live in the Kali Yuga, where we don't have any connection to the higher. We don't have any orders, any sacred orders we can be inducted into. And it's basically all chaos and just terrible. And his critique of Nietzsche is basically that, oh, Nietzsche's just an individualist. He's pushing forward the same type of problem where we don't seek the higher. Everything's material. Everything's about quote unquote science. But I would encourage Evola, and if you're interested in traditionalism, to think about this. The transcendent naturally has to accompany all phases of life. So there's the yin and the yang, right? There's the down, and then there's the curve up, and then there's the sort of mellowing out at the top, and then it starts curving downwards again, mellows out at the bottom. And you can sort of represent the two ends, the lowest and the highest crest, the lowest trough. You can represent these as being the times of the god Dionysus, because Dionysus is the god of chaos. He is there at the beginning and the end, because all order must stem from chaos, because our universe is so chaotic that order must come from it, because if it was completely chaotic, if it was completely random, then it's a sort of a paradox where there would be order in of itself. So the order that exists in humanity, in the human mind, in human society, comes from the chaos. And Zarathustra and Dionysus, it's the same god, believes, well, doesn't believe, simply embodies the chaos. And this plants the seed for the Apollonian order to follow, which puts things into a certain perspective, which pushes a certain order. And when these two things combine, when they reach their highest point together, they form the transcendent, the full chaos of Dionysus and the order of Apollo. Okay, now Apollo, when you follow the Apollonian way of thinking, it eventually leads into what we find ourselves in now, where everything is systematized until the system forgets the transcendent in the first place. But, and then of course things fall to chaos, as we see. But in the same way that the Apollonian way of thinking is its own undoing, the harmony eventually destroys itself. The disharmony, the chaos, the wild passions of Dionysus, of Nietzsche, of Zarathustra, they themselves dissipate the chaos because the passions are such that they form a new order. And Nietzsche sort of explicitly writes about this. So when Evola criticizes Nietzsche and says, oh, you're about individualism, I think he's misunderstanding. Nietzsche, Dionysus, is calling out to the greater man of the future to seed the transcendent. When he's talking about the transvaluation of values, to create a new system of values, to create new morality, to call out to God, Nietzsche is talking about something that will happen and that he is laying the seeds for. Because the transcendent is everything, right? The transcendent is the highest point in which everything is in perfect unity. But in order to even be able to have unity in the first place, there must, of course, be differences. So there's a civilizational phase. And Evola, he talks about the Kali Yuga, the different cycles. He completely agrees with civilizational phases. So when he says that Nietzsche's not with the transcendent, it's not quite accurate because actually Nietzsche is calling out to the transcendent and he is seeding a new religion to follow. So the last religion that was had, the last religion which calls back to this traditionalism, is medieval Christianity. That's what Guénon believed. He believed medieval Christianity was uh, the way to go, the way to be, because they believed in this higher God and society was ordered and people felt good and it was a good society. And I think I would agree with that. But that religion is dead now. It's dead. That religion that existed in medieval times is dead and gone. And there's always the yin and the yang, right? So if you have a religion which is about pity and humbleness and uh, giving away at the expense of yourself, then you must have a religion which follows it, which is in reaction to that, which the reaction is to seek the higher, to seek the greater, to instead of charity, instead of helping the weak, to help the strong, the opposite of charity, to create beautiful things, not to create love, not to take your beauty and to give it away, but to take and create beauty. You see, Nietzsche, it's the opposite. And the way that Nietzsche should be interpreted is that Nietzsche, he believes in the transcendent. He is possessed by the transcendent. He's a god. He explicitly says so. People called him mad, people called him crazy, but it's literally written in Zarathustra that this is what's going to happen, where people do not understand. Uh, People do not understand what he's talking about because he is not talking to them. He's spreading a message that will reach the higher man of the future. And then this man will see the little seed that Nietzsche put into the soil grow into a budding plant full of life that will carry civilization forwards with a new order. So, yeah, I think that's something pretty important. And when viewed from that lens, and I do really like Evola, and I do like the transcendent aspect of Evola. I think he says many smart things, but I think he missed the point of Nietzsche, and I think Nietzsche surpasses Evola in just about every way because people claim that Nietzsche is an individualist, the prime individualist nihilist, and they claim that Evola believes in traditional community or fascism and this sort of like communal value system. But it's actually the complete opposite, okay? Because Evola's solution in Ride the Tiger is to be a quote unquote differentiated man, which basically just means you're a Sigma male. That's kind of cringe. Nietzsche believes in being an alpha male, in leading society. He believes in coming together, and it's in the first chapter of Thus Spoke Zarathustra. It's all about the tightrope. It's about how everybody should be clapping and cheering and wishing the best on this person walking the tightrope because he is trying to take humanity forward, and everybody should be cheering him along for that reason. Nietzsche is explicitly calling on a system where everybody comes together to create the greater man. To and the greater Who is the greater man? Well, we are all part of the greater man throughout time. We form the tendrils which will lead into the greatest man, which will lead into God. Okay, God the Father. Okay. So Nietzsche is calling on society to come together. And when he's talking about this individualism, when he's talking about becoming greater than yourself, overcoming, he is talking to the great men of history. That's who he is talking to. He is talking to the men who want to overcome. And he is saying that a religion that is for them to overcome, has arrived. And that when the time is right, when they appear, when they exist, when they hear his call, they will implement his values. They will implement his religion. And the religion is spelled out in the first chapter of Thus Spoke Zarathustra. His religion is that the person who is on the tightrope, risking his life for seemingly silly reasons, but just to push humanity forwards, to get to the other end, that everybody should clap and that everybody should honor that. And that is fundamentally what Nietzsche is talking about. He's talking about humanity honoring, seeking the transcendent, seeking greatness, seeking the higher man of the future, which is ultimately God. And Evola, on the other hand, Evola basically just is like, be a person with your own values, be an independent guy who's strong, which that's cool, I guess. It's like I like that, but that's that's basically what people accuse Nietzsche of being. But Nietzsche's actually neither an individualist nor a nihilist. He's simply speaking to the great man who is uh, naturally pragmatic and is naturally overcoming and seeking the will to power themselves, who's naturally individualist because they're so overflowing with power. And people mix this up entirely. Evola is the one who's basically talking about being individualist. Nietzsche is talking about seeking the transcendent. Evola claims he's talking about seeking the transcendent, but then he writes a book about how to basically just be your own person. While Nietzsche is actually seeking the transcendent, and he actually has a multi-century plan, even multi-millennia plan on carrying this forward, and he writes it all down. So that's where I think that Evola just misunderstood Nietzsche, and that actually much of what the traditionalists seek is in Nietzsche's writing. It's just not explicitly written out. Evola explicitly writes out all this stuff, but Nietzsche, he knew all this, and it comes through in his writing. If you actually read what he's saying, without reading some poisonous analysis, which is saying that Nietzsche's an individualist or a nihilist, which is false. If you actually read Nietzsche, you will see that he is calling to the transcendent. And I think traditionalists should re-evaluate Nietzsche, and they should actually read his raw writing, not the analysis, because I think much of the analysis done in the 20th century regarding Nietzsche was very poor. And rereading it in the modern day, it has a you can very easily understand what he's actually saying. And it's amazing that he was able to see so clearly how our modern world would look. And Nietzsche does actually lay out the solutions in a way that Evola does not. And Evola does not realize that Nietzsche is. So, yeah, if you're a traditionalist, I'd love to hear what you think. But I really think that Nietzsche is the arch traditionalist thinker. Uh, you just don't know it.